Hello and welcome to Zee Formula One Amateur. My name is Humura Ruth. I host the show. I hope you're doing great. I hope you're doing lovely. It's the 26th of December 2020. Only about 4 or 5 days to end the year. Wow, this is crazy. It's been a crazy year. It's been a very hard year, a disastrous year for me, a tough time for people in Formula One. But thank God it's coming to an end. And with that close that's coming really soon, I just thought I could reminisce and look at and go through some of my Formula One favorites, like my favorite driver of the 2020 season, my favorite race circuit of the 2020 season, the rising star of the 2020 season, and my favorite race of the year, just some of those things. I got inspiration. I follow a page on Instagram called Formula One City. I think it's F1 City, and they had fans. I think go onto their website and vote, and they voted the best driver of the year. That one was, I think, the person that won was Lewis Hamilton. The rising star of the year, George Russell, was the winner of that one. The best race of the year, I think it was the Turkish Grand Prix to them. And the best race circuit, I think they said Istanbul. I don't even know what Istanbul looks like, honestly. But yeah, so I just took inspiration from that and decided to make a podcast out of it and just, share my Formula One favorites. Maybe some of my favorites are in line with what the fans voted, and maybe some of them are not in line. So join me. Welcome to the show. I hope you had a great Christmas. I hope you had a fun, weekend. Not weekend, it was a weekday. Well, I don't know what my Christmas was like. Okay, I know what it was like because I experienced it, but it wasn't like the other Christmases that I've had before. It was a tough time, but nonetheless, I'm grateful to God for family, for food, for shelter, for joy, for a lot of things. And so I'm glad. And so I'm going to reminisce on some of the things that I'm grateful for, like Formula One. And to me, so there was this, and to me, my favorite things in Formula One, always around the cars, the trucks, and the drivers, and all that. The 2020 season was packed. It was intense. There was 17 races in the race calendar. We didn't have a race in Australia. We didn't have races in some of the places that we usually have races at or in because of the COVID season. But thank God we did manage to have 17 races. And out of all those races that we had in the entire 2020 F1 season, my favorite when it comes to the rising star that I saw in the Formula One season. Now this one, the F1 City fans voted for George Russell, and I think George Russell is great. He's a rising star to watch in Formula One. But personally, my favorite was Lando Norris. But let's just look at George Russell for a bit. Now, in 2020, when it comes to the driver standings for 2020, George Russell is number 18, which is pretty good. He's number 18 ahead of Romain Grosjean, Kevin Magnussen, Nicolas Latifi, Aitken, and Fittipaldi. I think George Russell is pretty good. He has pushed the Williams car. I don't know why I keep calling it Mark Williams. He's pushed the Williams car and just gotten the best out of it. Like he always says, if in doubt, go flat out. He always goes flat out with that car. He pushes it. And sometimes when you look at that car, when I used to see maybe say Robert Kubicki, is it called Kubicki? I don't know, Kubica. When he was racing, you just believe that the Williams car was, it wasn't good enough. But somehow when George Russell sits in that car, he pushes it and it kind of gives you hope because he does really, really well with the car. Actually, in 2019, George Russell out qualified his teammate Robert Kubica at 21 Grand Prix. That's very impressive given the fact that this guy is young. I mean, he's younger than me. I'm not used to, having people younger than me, but yeah, I guess I'm getting older because I think George Russell is about 22 years of age, so he's done pretty great. And you have to remember that in Formula 2 in 2018, he was a champion holder, and then he got signed by Mercedes Junior Program in 2017, and in 2020 we saw him do really great in the Williams car. Like I said before, driver standings is number 18, and then I think his best race or highest race finish was P9 at the Bahrain Grand Prix, the Sikia Grand Prix. That's when, and he was supposed to, come out on top. He was supposed to be a podium finisher anyway, but then he had these tire mishaps, and then he had the fake tire changes, and then he got a puncture in his tire, and everything just went to hell. Anyway, that was the fans' rising star. I don't know if it was your rising star of 2020 when it comes to Formula One, but I think George Russell did pretty great. My favorite, not my favorite, but somebody I would want to watch when it comes to F1 that I saw in 2020 is Lando Norris. He's my rising star. He finished P5 at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, just behind Max Verstappen, Bottas, Hamilton, and Alex Albon. He's a few years young. He's 1 year younger than George Russell. Actually, he's 21 years, and I remember he's the youngest British driver to get signed into F1. He's pretty dope, you guys. Pretty dope. And I love his motto or his slogan. He always says, no, he doesn't always say, but they say that he says. So I don't know if he actually says it, but he says he hopes the downforce will be with him. Just a little history when it comes to Lando Norris. In 2015, he won the MSA Formula Championship. The following year, in 2016, he won the Toyota Racing Series, the Euro Cup Formula Renault 2.0, and the Formula Renault 2.0 Northern European Cup Series. In 2017, he won the Formula 3 European Championship, and that was during the time in 2017 he started doing test driving for McLaren. And then I remember, I think in Hungary or something like that, he set the second fastest lap in the second day of testing. Later in 2017, he became the official McLaren test and reserve driver for the 2018 season. So you already see him becoming, you already see a very, I was going to say potentious person, but person with a lot of potential when it comes to Formula One. And that was in 2017, yeah. So he became a member of the McLaren Young Driver Program, which is pretty great. I think McLaren is a pretty good team right now. In 2018, 2019, it was a horrible team. But then in 2019 is when he made his first Formula One debut at the Australian Grand Prix, where he finished in P12 ahead of Sergio Perez. He was ahead of Alex Albon. He was ahead of Antonio Giovinazzi, ahead of George Russell, ahead of Romain Grosjean, ahead of Robert Kubica, ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. But that was because Daniel Ricciardo retired from the race. And he's done pretty good. And bearing the fact that he joined McLaren alongside Carlos Sainz Jr., who has been in Formula One for I think 5 or 6 years. When it comes, let me give you some of his favorite, his good performing races in 2019. He qualified in Q2. I think that was the 8th position in his debut race in Australia, and then he finished in the 12th place, like I said before. The next race in Bahrain, that's when Lando got his first points as a Formula One driver, when he finished P6, which means he got 8 points. At the Azerbaijan race, he finished P8. At the Austrian Grand Prix, he finished P6. And then at the end of the debut season, he finished 11th place in the championship with 49 points, which was okay behind his teammate Carlos Sainz, but he had done pretty good. Now, when it comes to you also have to remember that during that time in 2019, Lando Norris out-qualified Carlos Sainz 11 to 10 over the course of the season. That is a pretty good driver for a young guy. I think he's dope. I now understand why teams are going in for younger drivers. You see Red Bull with Max Verstappen. I don't know if Red Bull started that whole trend, but a lot of teams are going in for younger drivers. There's more potential in the young people. I don't know, they come with this zeal, this energy into the racetrack. They don't joke, they don't mess. For them, it's, I don't know, it's win or win. Now, when it comes to the 2020 season, yeah, Lando Norris is in driver standings the 9th place with 97 points. He's behind Leclerc, Albon, Sainz, Ricardo Perez, Verstappen, Bottas, and Hamilton. But he's doing pretty good, I think, in 9th place, because in 2018-19, like I said before, he was the 11th in the drivers' championship. Now he's moved up a few steps ahead, I think 3 steps, and now he's 9th in the drivers' championship with 97 points. I think he's doing great. In the opening race in Austria, because of COVID, we didn't begin from Australia and all that. Lando got his first podium finish, second year in Formula One. It was in Austria that Lando Norris became the 3rd youngest driver to stand on the podium in Formula One history. Isn't that great? He's really a promising driver. Now, here's some of his good races. At the Styrian Grand Prix, he finished P5 with the pink Mercedes breathing down his neck. You remember there was the time of the pink Mercedes saga. That's when the saga started beginning, when people were like, oh, how come pink Mercedes is challenging people that are really good. At the Italian Grand Prix, Lando Norris finished P4 behind Carlos Sainz, was in P2. At the Tuscan Grand Prix, Lando Norris finished 6th. And at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which was the final race of the season, Lando Norris finished P4. He was doing pretty good. I told you, he's a star. He's one driver that is, doing really good at such a young age. It kind of reminds me of like a Max Verstappen, but like a more subtle Max Verstappen, not too wild, not too aggressive and all that, which I think which makes a good driver. It makes him a good driver. But he's bad. He has also had some bad Grand Prix, I should say. And I think the Russian Grand Prix, the Eiffel Grand Prix, and the Portuguese Grand Prix, when he was criticized for saying harsh things about Lance Stroll. I think he said something along the lines that Lance Stroll doesn't always seem to land, and then he had kind of criticized Lewis Hamilton by downplaying Lewis's achievements. But afterwards, he's such a sweet guy. He apologized to both Lance Stroll and Lewis Hamilton. I get this thing on Lewis. A lot of people criticize Lewis. I'm like, why do you do that? Recently, I saw a video with over a million views on YouTube. I don't even want to say the title of the video because I don't want to bring any more attention to it. And basically, the person was trash talking Lewis and saying that maybe, he's not so good as a driver as he is, and he has too much money. It has gotten into his head. And when you realize that people who say a lot of those things are just speaking from places of anger. And one time somebody told me, there are people who always hate the rich people because they're just broke and they just can't be rich as them. I'm not worth 200 million, but I don't know. Some people just have so much anger towards Lewis because in the video the person was like, oh, he doesn't drive that good, and oh, he talks about climate change and all that, yet he drives a Formula One car, and this Formula One cars use a lot of fuel and all this. And in my head I was like, I don't really think you know so much about Formula One, because right now they're developing a fuel for Formula One that's 100% sustainable. Number two, Formula One cars don't use that much fuel as people would assume, because I think in a race, all the 20 cars use half the fuel a plane taking off from, I think, London to, let me say, Middle East would use. So they don't use that much fuel, and they're developing more sustainable fuel. I don't know, this person just was so outraged at the success of Lewis, and I'm like, why do people hate successful people? I think that that kind of attitude also brings you down. And we strayed a bit from what we're talking about. Lando Norris also suffered at the Turkish Grand Prix, which the Formula One City fans voted as the favorite Grand Prix of all time for them in the 2020 season. But at the Turkish Grand Prix, Lando Norris started from P14 on the grid after he got a 5-place grid penalty. That must have sucked, getting a penalty on the grid and then actually starting 5 places down. That's horrible, if you should say. But anyway, that's my rising star when it came to the 2020 season. That's one person I was watching out for. I'm going to be watching out for him in the 2021 season, and I'm excited for the things that Lando Norris achieves. I hope his car gets better. It's very unpredictable with F1 because one season Ferrari was doing good, and then in 2020 Ferrari was doing so horribly wrong. Did I see that comment where people were like, they were suing Pink Mercedes for copying the Mercedes? Why did they sue Ferrari for copying the Williams car? It was so bad. Anyway, now let's go to the best driver of the 2020 season, and the fans voted for Lewis Hamilton. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, by the way, but the fans, I don't know how to say Hamilton. I find myself adding an I after L. I think it's because of my accent and all that, dialects and all that. But anyway, the best driver was Lewis Hamilton. I get that. He's a superb driver. I've been a huge fan of him for a long time. I love his hair. I just had to say that I love his hair. He has great hair, and he's a fantastic driver. I mean, he's been in 266 Grand Prix. He has won 95 of them. He's had 165 podiums. He's a 7-time world champion. He has won championships in 2008, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. And hopefully he stops there for just at least 2 years so that Daniel Ricciardo takes the next 2. And then he's also had 98 pole positions. He's a fantastic driver. I get it why sometimes people hate on him. They just beef him and all that. But anyway, my best driver for 2020 season has been Daniel Ricciardo. I don't know whether I'm just such a huge fan of his, or I really, really do appreciate his work, but I think he's my best driver of 2020 season. He's the Honey Badger, and he drives a car number 3. Oh, by the way, Lando Norris's car number is number 4, and Lewis Hamilton's car number is 444. So hopefully, Lando follows in Lewis's steps. Anyway, still on the Honey Badger. So when it comes to driver standings of the 2020 F1 season, Daniel Ricciardo finished 5th with 119 points behind Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen, Valtteri Bottas, and Lewis Hamilton. He did pretty good. I think he's doing pretty good. And when you look at these driver standings and you see that Bottas is behind Hamilton, and then there were people who wanted Bottas to be removed from Mercedes and all that, I just think those people were kind of a bit fake, because Bottas is actually a good driver. He's just facing the hardest opponent to beat, and that's Lewis Hamilton. You see, driver standings is number two. Usually it's Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen on the podiums and all that. So Bottas is actually a pretty good driver. Anyway, Daniel Ricciardo, some of his best races that I loved in 2020 was at Silverstone when he in August, when he finished P4. At the Belgium Grand Prix he finished P4 as well. At the Italian Grand Prix he finished at P6. At the Tuscany Grand Prix he finished P4. Do you see how close he is to a podium? I think the car lets down Daniel Ricciardo, and that's why he keeps moving from team to team, because we first saw him in Red Bull, but then when Red Bull got Max Verstappen, I don't know, there's a trend in Formula One teams now to lean towards, younger drivers. I don't know why. I think they're more aggressive on the track, and they just, I don't know what it is the younger drivers have. But anyway, there's a trend to go towards younger drivers. We have so many younger drivers on the grid, because I think, is it this season or 2019 season, when half the grid was younger than ever before in the history of Formula One. Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, George Russell, Max Verstappen, Pierre Gasly, those are all young people who are driving. But anyway, how did I get there? So I was just saying Daniel Ricciardo has been in P4, P4, P4 a lot of the times, and it's the car that's really, really stopping him. He's been with Renault now, I think, for 2 years, and he has helped Renault develop. He has helped push Renault to a better place. At the Russian Grand Prix, he finished in P5. At the Eiffel Grand Prix, he finished P3. He got a podium finish. That was in Imola. It was so beautiful. He even had the opportunity to take champagne from his shoe. I don't know if I'll do that, even if I really am a super fan of Daniel Ricciardo taking champagne from my shoe. Lord, no. That a stranger's shoe. And when Lewis Hamilton actually took champagne from Daniel Ricciardo's shoe, I don't know which, I'm not sure which race it was, but Daniel was so happy. I remember some people were commenting that Daniel was more happy to have Lewis Hamilton um, have the shoe or take champagne from his shoe than he was to be on that podium. Anyway, he finished P3 at the Eiffel Grand Prix. I just had to repeat that. He also finished P3 at Emilia Romagna. So he finished P3 at Nürburgring and Imola. Those were his two podium finishes in the race. At the Sakhir Grand Prix, he finished P5. And at the Abu Dhabi race, he finished P7. But to be honest, at the Abu Dhabi race, the last race of the season, he was supposed to be in P4. Okay, that's where Lando Norris finished. But here's the thing, he was in P4 for such a long time. Abu Dhabi has how many races? How many laps? I don't know. I think like, I don't know. I don't know. Like let's just say there are 50 laps in Abu Dhabi. So 40 of those laps he was in P4, and then he went and had the pit stop. He had a pit stop that just gave him tires. They weren't warming up. The tires were slowing down, and by the time he got out to try and catch up and regain his position, his car was just not performing to him. I understand now when Formula One drivers say that when you're driving a car, it has to be in unison with your body. You have to understand the car, and the car has to understand you. You just have to be one with the car. And I don't really think Daniel is being one with the Renault car. It seems like he's faster than the car. I don't know if that makes sense. I think that's the thing with Roman Grosjean. That's how he was. He was faster than the car and just keeps losing control of it. Anyway, so during at the beginning of the 2020 season was really early. Daniel Ricciardo announced that he's moving to McLaren for the 2021 season, and we're excited because Lando Norris is pretty funny, and Daniel is as well funny, and I think Daniel is going to bully Lando Norris in such a good brotherly way. It would be lovely to meet. I think my favorite Formula One team duos of all times. I think I'm going to say something that doesn't make sense, but I love Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton together. I just loved seeing that rivalry. It was like for me Telemundo mixed with the sport. And then I also loved Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen. If you watch the Netflix series, it makes them seem like they were mortal enemies, but off track they were pretty cool. So I'm also excited to see. I also loved Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris together, and the fact that the duo is going to be split. It's hard to take in, but it's going to Carlos is going to be replaced with a much cooler person, I should say. So I can't wait to see Daniel and Lando Norris together, especially on the YouTube videos. Those videos always make me happy. Can't wait to see that. And he's, let's just say it, my favorite driver, the best driver of the 2020 season has been, and I think will always be, Daniel Ricciardo. Now, let's move on to the best race of the year. When it comes to the best race of the year, the F1 City fans voted the Italian Grand Prix. I'm not sure. It's not my favorite. It wasn't my favorite race, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. It wasn't my favorite. But anyway, here's the thing. It happened on Sunday, the 6th of September. Oh, I get it. I now understand why people love this race. It was a race in which Pierre Gasly won his first Formula One race. It was beautiful. It was Pierre Gasly number one, Carlos Sainz Jr. number two, Lance Stroll number three, Lando Norris number four. Do you see how good this boy is? Valtteri Bottas number 5, Daniel Ricciardo number 6, Lewis Hamilton number 7. And it was the sixth race of the season, 53 laps. It started as usual. Lewis started on pole position and he was doing very good until he got a penalty for entering the pit lane when it was closed, and that's when Pierre started getting the lead ahead of Hamilton. Hamilton actually ended up finishing the race in P7. But it was beautiful. Pierre Gasly won his first Formula One win. You guys, he has had a hard time because prior to that, I think in 2019 or 18, I'm sorry if I get this year wrong, he lost his friend Antonio Hubert. May his soul rest in peace. He passed away. He was a Formula 2 driver as well. He was a Formula 2 driver. And then at the same time, the previous year, Red Bull had just demoted him and brought him back to Toro Rosso, which is now AlphaTauri. It was kind of embarrassing for what happened to Pierre. Actually, I was listening to a few podcasts on the Formula 1 podcast, Formula 1 F1 Beyond the Grid, and they had brought Pierre Gasly, and it was about the time when he was joining Red Bull, and he was talking about how excited he was to join Red Bull, how he was telling his brothers, and there was so much joy. And in my heart, when I was listening to it, I was very sad because I know what happened in the future. I'm in the future. When he got demoted after 12 races, it was very, very sad. But anyway, good things do come to people who wait, to good people. That's just me saying. So when he won at Monza, that was a beautiful thing. First of all, he became the first French Formula One driver to win a race since Olivier Panis won the 1996 Monaco Grand Prix. It's been a long, long time. I mean, those years are even more than my age, since a Formula One French driver had won a Formula One Grand Prix. And it's interesting because Pierre started in P10 and now he ended up finishing the race. As always, interesting things to note: Kevin Magnussen's car was smashed and then a safety car came in. There's just something about the Haas cars I don't get. I don't get it. With the new team on board, with I don't know if Nikita Mazepin is really coming to F1, because Lord knows. But anyway, when Mick Schumacher comes in, I hope the cars are more stable and they don't get torn up into pieces. Because I remember when I watched Netflix Drive to Survive series, there's a point when Gunther Stein, I think his team principal was telling Roman Grosjean that if you keep crushing our cars, we're going to run bankrupt. Anyway, so it was also the first race since the 2012 Hungarian Grand Prix in which a Red Bull, Ferrari, or Mercedes driver wasn't on the podium. So it was pretty unexpected. It was also interesting to note that both Ferraris retired in their home race. How embarrassing. Okay, not embarrassing, but how heartbreaking was it for an Italian team to retire in their home race? Also, Max Verstappen retired on lap 31. It was also the last race for Claire and Frank Williams as they stepped down from their positions at Williams Racing. It was very unfortunate. The Williams team was really good back in the day before I was born. Between 1979 and 1997, the Williams Racing team had won 7 drivers' championships, 9 constructors' championships, and they had a total of 113 wins. Where all that went as I grew up, I don't know, because right now it's doing badly. And I was really rooting for Claire Williams remaining as team principal because I wanted to see more women in the sport and all this. And she had to leave. And I think she said why she left, I'm thinking, I stand to be corrected, was the fact that the team I think had been sold to somebody else, and so she couldn't continue managing it when it was no longer under them. It was very unfortunate, but I think she did a pretty damn good job. And you should listen to the Nico Rosberg podcast, Beyond Victory, when he interviews Claire Williams on it. It's very inspirational and very nice. So that's just some of the things that happened at the Italian Grand Prix, which was voted the best race of the year. But for me, that wasn't my favorite race of the year. My favorite race of the year was the Sakhir Grand Prix. I think it was on the 6th of December 2020. I remember I had exams, I think It was on a Sunday. I think I had an exam on Monday, but I sat down and watched the race. I loved it. First of all, it was the first time for Lewis Hamilton to miss a race in about 27 years. That's when George Russell replaced Lewis Hamilton, and there was this whole horrible mess when Mercedes gave Russell the wrong tires when he was pitted under safety car. I think on lap 62 of 87, and then he had to go in for another pit stop to correct the error. And then after he had just gone to the second pit stop to correct the error, he then suffered a puncture that left him P9 in P9, and when he rejoined the race, he was just dropping. But anyway, he ended up George Russell ended up finishing P9. Valtteri Bottas also suffered during that race. I remember he was in the pit stop, and the rims of where the wheels are inserted on a Formula One car. I remember they were so hot that there were flames coming on the rims, so he had to be in the pit stop for I think over 27 seconds. There was a lot of time to spend in there. But I think Valtteri Bottas came up P8. And at the beginning of the race, the Ferrari car failed to handle its brakes. That was being driven by Charles Leclerc, and so Charles ended up knocking the Racing Point car, which was driven by Sergio Perez. He spun the car around, and Perez got caught up in the crash. It was on turn 4. Then he had to pit at the end of the first lap, which made him drop to the last place. But somehow he ended up finishing the race. It was Sergio Perez's first number 1 race finish after 190 races. The guy had the most races without a win at all. It had also been half a century since a Mexican driver stood on top of a podium. The last one I think where it stood was in 1970 at the Belgian Grand Prix. So it was a pretty interesting race. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc were eliminated from the race because of the crash at turn 4. I loved this race, you guys. I loved this race. It was also, I think, around the time when they announced that Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen were possibly leaving the Haas team after being there for 4 seasons. It was a dramatic race for me. That was my best race of the year, you guys. I loved it. It was dramatic. Lewis wasn't there. We didn't know who was going to win. And then the Mercedes saga, and then Sergio Perez beginning from the bottom and then ending up at the top. It's quite interesting to see and to watch and to experience. Anyway, now, lastly, my best Formula One circuit. Now, the best circuit voted by the Formula One City fans was the Istanbul circuit. To be honest, I don't remember what that circuit looks like, but my favorite circuit of all times is, I think I have 2, and they're quite similar in some sort of way. It's the Monaco circuit and the Marina Bay Street circuit. The Monaco circuit, also known as Circuit de Monaco, if you want to be so Monacan, is a street circuit. Of course, it's laid out on the city streets. I think those are the cool Formula One circuits. You see people even love the Baku street circuit. Street circuits are very fun, especially if you don't have paddock access, or you don't want to pay for grandstand seat. You can do a street circuit because you can be in a hotel and actually see the corners and the turns of the race. But I don't get that whole logic of watching an F1 race from a hotel room and you're peeping down. I don't understand it, because if I'm watching one corner, then I'm just going to see cars just going out, zwee. Anyway, maybe you get that hype, that experience. I would do that. I would be looking outside my window, but I would have my TV screen in my hotel room tuned to Sky Sports or Motorsport HD, so I could have both views. I can see the cars down, and then I can see on the screen on television. And my dream, Lord, it's a dream, Jesus, I am putting it out there, that I wanted to paddock access for the Monaco Grand Prix, the Mexican Grand Prix, the Singapore Grand Prix, and the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. I had tickets for the Monaco Grand Prix. I think they started at $1,500. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a street circuit. It's laid on the city streets of Monte Carlo and La Condamine. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's 3,337 kilometers long, and it has 19 tons. A circuit is very exciting if it has so many tons more than straights. I love it when it has so many tons, because that's the point to see how good your car is, how good your braking system is. If you listen to my previous podcast about the Racing Point brake saga, when Racing Point decided to copy the brakes of the Mercedes car, it was alleged that they did. I think this is why they copied the brakes. When you have a race circuit with about 19 tons, and Monaco has very short straights, I think the straights are about 500 meters, you really need to have a good braking system, because if you're coming at over 200 kilometers per hour, you really need to be able to brake right on time, and you need to be able to brake pretty good to be able to finish, the race very well. It's also a place I love the most because that's when Daniel Ricciardo won in Monaco in 2018. It was pretty nice. And then Max Verstappen holds the lap race record at the Monaco Grand Prix. It's about a minute and 14 seconds. And then, yeah, I think it's also, there's so much fuss about. I saw somewhere where, like, they were saying Monaco doesn't need F1. F1 needs Monaco. There's a lot of fuss around Monaco. Celebrities love living in Monaco. The coolest race drivers all live, rent in Monaco. It's I don't know, it's luxury. Isn't it one of the most expensive states in Europe or something? Are there states in Europe? But I know Monaco is a state. Is it a province or something? Yeah. But anyway, my second circuit that I really love, actually, if I was told to choose between Monaco and the Marina Bay Street Circuit, I think I would go with Marina Bay. I love Singapore. Singapore is just beautiful. So the Marina Bay Street Circuit is a street circuit. It's in Singapore. It costs, I think, 330 million US dollars to build. It's longer than Monaco circuit. It's about 5,000 kilometers. It also has that harborside location, just like Monaco and the Valencia Street circuit. It's also a night race. You guys, who doesn't love a night race? It is gorgeous. It's a night race. The streets are lit. It's Singapore, you guys. It is beautiful. And at this point, I've forgotten the capital city of Singapore, but I know it. But the city is beautiful at that point. There's over 170,000 lamps that are lit on the circuit. It is just fast paced. It's hot in the night. I don't know why it's hot in the night there, but before the race, you already see the drivers having these ice baths and dipping themselves and claiming that there's a lot of humidity. Okay, they're not claiming, but they say there's a lot of humidity. And quite interestingly, Kevin Magnussen has a lap record there. He set the lap record in 2018, and I think it's a minute and 41 seconds. Now, the Monaco Bay Street circuit has 23 turns. Do you see why I love this circuit? A circuit with so many turns is tricky because you never know who's going to crash, you never know who has the best brakes, you never know who's going to overtake, who is going to drive into the walls. Remember the time when Sergio Perez put his teammate out, Esteban Ocon, the time when Pierre Gasly and Charles Leclerc were racing against each other in Singapore. It's a beautiful um, race. It also has short straights because it has so many turns. The straights are shorter, just like Monaco. I think the straights are about 500 meters, so it makes it so exciting to watch and so fun to be. I would love to attend the Monaco Grand Prix. No, the Singapore Grand Prix. I think that's my ultimate favorite. And I would want to have paddock access. I always want to have paddock access. Anyway, thanks for listening in. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed reminiscing over the 2020 Zee Formula 1 season with me. 2021 is upon us. I can't wait. And my biggest dream is that Daniel Ricciardo becomes an F1 champion 2021. That would be so beautiful. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope you had a good time. See you in the next episode. If you'd love to get in touch with me, which I'd love, you can find me on Twitter. My handle is at Zee Formula 1 Amateur. On Instagram, Zee Formula 1 Amateur. My email address is theformula1amateur@gmail.com. Have a good day.